Good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Good morning.
I like the expectation that she's going to hear something nice. That's what you call wishful thinking, isn't it?
Yeah.
But interestingly enough, we are going to look at something interesting. And the reason for that is we are covering two subjects. Ooh. The first subject has to do with covenant, and the second subject has to do with storehouses. Yeah. So, we're not going to go into it in great detail. I'm just getting an idea of the time, right? Yeah, probably could do this in about 50 or 60 minutes. Yeah. That should be all right. I want to start us off in Joshua. We're going to Joshua 9. Now it came to pass when all the kings who were on the side of Jordan in the hills and on the low side and on all the coasts of the great sea towards Lebanon, the Hittite, the Ammonite, the Canaanite, the Perizzite, the Hivite, the Jebusite heard about it, that they gathered together to fight with Joshua and Israel with one accord. But when the inhabitants of Gibeon heard that Joshua had done to Jericho and Ai, they worked craftily and went and pretended to be ambassadors, took old sacks on their donkeys, old wineskins torn and mended, old and patched sandals on their feet, old garments on themselves, and all the bread of their provision was dry and moldy. You all are familiar with this story. Now I'm going to step away from Scripture for a moment and let's recap. What's going on here? Israel has just invaded the Promised Land. It's a gift from God, but the inhabitants that are there don't quite see it that way. So they have mobilized. They've decided, right, we're going to get our armies all together and come against this nation and hold them back. That's the plan. It's a good enough plan. We can understand it from modern day warfare, how the whole thing would work. So we can see their thinking. Joshua, on the other hand, hasn't really got a problem. God's fighting for him, so he's just going that way. Forward into the land. Never mind what happens. But there's a spanner. The spanner is a small, well, actually quite a large town, which is over a lot of smaller towns and villages, and it's called Gibeon. The Gibeonites are a separate people. They are very strong in the land and have a mighty army of their own and a reputation as fighting men. So they're potentially a major threat when Israel comes against them. But when they saw what happened to Jericho and Ai, their immediate reaction is, these people are fighting right. There's a problem here. There's no way we're going to be able to fight them under normal circumstances. We need something that will work. And so they come up with a plan. It's ingenious. They make out that they belong to a nation far away and provide all of the props to make that seem to be the case. And they arrive into the camp of Israel, tired, dusty, exhausted after their long journey. And the Israelites look around them, check their provisions, see everything that they say makes sense. It does appear all to be right, and accept them what they see. They accept what they see. What they don't do is check it out with God, which was a mistake. But they thought, well, fair enough, this is a nation from a faraway place wanting to make a covenant of peace and prosperity between the two nations. And so after a long discussion, debate and all the rest, it's cut. What's cut? A covenant's cut. Now, here's the problem, and this is the bit most people miss. When you cut a covenant, you cut it between your gods. So the Gibeonites cut it between their God, and the Israelites cut it between their God, so that the gods would witness and bring retribution if there is a problem here. So, it's binding. It's very, very, important that you not break this. As Israel then, after this is all done, after a few days, move on into the country, they come across a city called Gibeon, and they discover it's the same people. What? You aren't far away. No. We're now your servants. We yield to your authority over us. We accept that you are the strong and dominant power, and all this land's going to be given to use, but we're going to be your servants. So Joshua's ripping, needless to say, because God had given strict orders. All of the people were to be removed. No exceptions. And here's a people that now they can't touch. It's ridiculous. It would annoy you. And they cheated. Don't forget they cheated. They brought false information to this agreement. But the agreement was signed before God. Even though all that evidence should have went against them, because they had already said they wouldn't attack them, they can't. They're stuck. So, how long is it for, these sort of binding agreements like that? Until one of two factors happen. One, somebody breaks it. Or two, one of the sides of the covenant no longer exists. That's the situation. Now, that's important to remember, because if you're going to break it, you're going to also come against gods, whichever God you're made the covenant with. Now, if they don't exist, that's not really a problem. If they do exist, you've got a big problem. And that's something you've got to break. Israel's gods exist. Israel's God exists. So we've got to know that. The rest of the kings, rulers, and powers in the land of Canaan are ever so slightly miffed. Gibeon was one of their strong allies. Now Gideon had made a covenant with Israel and wouldn't fight against her. So they decided, we can't have this. We can't have her siding with Israel in the middle of a battle. So let's all attack Gibeon and wipe them out. You'll find this, by the way, over the page in the next chapter, chapter 10 of Joshua. Now, the reason this is important is because Gideon recognizes that all these armies are coming against her to destroy her. They're going to wipe her out. So she sends for help to Joshua, to Israel. Help! We're about to get slaughtered here. Help! Now, I want to put you into the picture here so that we get this in our heads right? You're a strategist, okay? You've been tricked, duped, if you like, into making a commitment you do really want to be in. You personally cannot intervene to deal with this. Armies decide to attack this other nation. How would it be if you simply didn't help? What if you simply stood back and let them take them out, deal with your problem, and then you can go in and deal with the other armies? Does that sound good? That sounds smart move? That sounds like something God might have even set up. But that's not what Israel did. Israel came to Gibeon's aid. She sent a large army. In fact, her entire army. And you immediately have to say, why? Did we not just say he was a perfect out for them? They had been tricked into this to begin with. They weren't breaking any of the rules. Our nation was taking them out. So why were they doing this? Well, here's your problem. You see, when you cut one of them covenants, those covenants mean you are cutting a family covenant between two peoples. They become your people, you become their people. That sort of thing, okay? So as such, you now have an expectation on you to defend, support, and help them when they need it. And their expectation is to defend and support and help you when you need it. So this is to be honored. And because Israel's in a covenant with them, when they asked Israel for help, Israel is honor bound to help them. Oh boy, wouldn't it be strange if nations today played like that? It'd be a totally different world, wouldn't it? However, here's the fun bit. And this is where we start getting into provisions, storehouses and the like. The men of Gibeon were at war, as I said, with these kings. Israel came, attacked the other armies. The battle was fierce. Israel was winning. Everything was going well. Some of the armies that were fighting against Israel were trying to get away. And in verse 11 of chapter 10, it happened that as they fled before Israel and were on the descent of Beth Horon, that the Lord, notice this, the Lord cast down large hailstones from heaven on them as far as Ahasa, and they died. In fact, there was more who died from the hailstones than who were slain by the children of Israel with the sword. I want you to take a note of that. Do you remember it looked as if God had set up a possible out for Israel? If it hadn't been God's desire to do that, why would he have fought the enemy here? Israel did what was right, going to the defense of the other nation. And God backs that up. Note, he's fighting for them. Now, Joshua has been told by God, whatever you need, ask, it's yours. And apart from that, he's still doing this as well. And as Joshua's fighting this battle, he realizes that Israel's on the rise. They're doing well here, but they're having a wee problem. It'll soon be evening. And so, verse 12, Joshua spoke to the Lord that day when the Lord delivered up the Ammonites before the children of Israel. And he said, in the sight of Israel, sun, stand still over Gibeon, moon in the valley of Abijam. As the sun stood still and the moon stopped, till the people had revenge upon their enemies. Here you have two miraculous interventions by God. One, God just throwing in help. The Hailstones weren't asked for. God just thought, oh no, you're not getting away. Boom. But the second one was asked for and given immediately. The sun didn't go down. It stayed. The moon stayed where it was. For a period of approximately 36 hours, you had an extended day. That is crazy. Now, if you have a wee chat with scientists, and occasionally you do have wee chats with scientists, they will tell you why this is impossible. But, as you can point out to them at any time, everything God does in the Bible is impossible. That don't stop them doing it. But why is it impossible? Well, let's look at it from a scientific standpoint. We know the sun and the moon are basically up there. The sun doesn't actually move, and the moon does orbit around the earth. But the sun is, or the earth is orbiting and turning all the time as well. So when this was stopped, as it was stopped, stop you there, stop you there. Everything was frozen. There was no movement of the earth. The moon's rotation stopped. The sun didn't have to stop. It was still up there. It wasn't moving anywhere anyway. But what should have happened is that the entire world lost gravity and we floated off into space. That's what should have happened. Didn't happen. Because gravity, from our understanding, is because of the spin of the earth. Gravity, from God's perspective, is by his word. And it will do what he tells it, and it will behave itself. Jesus proved this when he walked on water. Try it sometimes. You'll find that if you believe in science, you'll sink. If you believe in God, you can walk on water. Jesus proved it. So did Peter. The rest of you, well, I don't know. But let me ask you a question. Have you ever seen a man fly? Well, you say, well, planes can go up, but then there's science behind this and all the rest. But Jesus defied gravity in that he went and ascended into heaven. Elisha defied gravity in that he was taken up in a chariot and carried away somewhere. Enoch defied gravity in that he was and then wasn't. He was taken away. I mean, all of these things God has shown as he goes through all of these different aspects. Our concept of science is wrong. Not because it's incorrect, but because we miss one important factor. God made it, and he can change it. And he does. Which is why these hailstones that hit these enemy are so unusual. They shouldn't have happened. You shouldn't have had hailstones at this time of year. You shouldn't have had hailstones at this size. In fact, Israel only knew about them because this is exactly what God had did to Egypt some 40 odd years before, when he decided to destroy the entire crops right across the whole land of Egypt by sending a hailstorm of massive size, and had warned all the people to make sure they stayed indoors because anyone outside or any animal left outside would be dead. And they were. So it's the same type of hailstones that are here. But we're also told about these hailstones when God decides to have a little word with a certain gentleman called Job. Job, if you remember, felt a wee bit put out because certain things were happening to him he couldn't understand. And he wanted to talk to God about it and felt God was ignoring him. When he did get talking to God, God pointed out one or two things. And one of the things was, have you seen the storehouses that I prepare for war? The snow and the hail, all for war. Have you ever thought about that? God prepares for war. What war? Who's he fighting? Us. Well, mankind. You see, he is established that his way is right, and he can choose whichever way he wants to fight with man. But we're not finished with the story of the Gibeons yet. The Gibeonites, you see, well, they're dealt with there for the moment, resurface. They resurface again in what we call 2 Samuel. Let's turn to 2 Samuel. Verse 21. Now there was a famine in the days of David for 3 years, year after year. So David inquired of the Lord, and the Lord answered. Now this is 2 Samuel 21, verse 1. And the Lord answered, it is because of Saul and his bloodthirsty house, because they killed the Gibeonites. Oh, we're back to the Gibeonites. What had Saul done? Now, it's not recorded in Scripture, this event. We don't know, we don't see Saul doing this. We see God referring to this and a judgment coming upon Israel after Saul's dead because of this. And that's what David's facing with now. So David called the Gibeonites together and spoke to them. Now the Gibeonites were not of the children of Israel, but of the remnant of the Ammonites. The children of Israel had sworn protection to them. Remember all that? We had judged that earlier. But Saul had thought to kill them in his zeal for the children of Israel and Judah. Therefore, he broke a covenant. But remember who the covenant's actually with? God. And after Saul is dead, years later, along comes a famine. And this is a strange situation because David knows there should be. A famine can happen for one or two reasons. A little shift of the weather, you might get a bit of less rain one year, more rain the next year. That happens. It's weather patterns. But 3 years in a row, a major famine, that's not normal. And he knows that, so he asks God, okay, what have we done wrong? What do we need to fix? Why are you withholding rain from us? Because David understood it was God who had brought the famine. So God told him, oh, Saul, Gibeonites, slaughter, genocide. That's the reason. The covenant that was made with Israel was broken, and therefore Israel's guilty of it. So I'm bringing in the big guns. The famine stays. I want you to think about that for a moment. Think about it. You're a leader of a country. You're a man after God's own heart. You're respected by God, and you can come into his presence and he will talk to you, not like your predecessor. And you ask him what the problem is, and he tells you, look, here's the problem. This is what happened. This is how it's done. It needs to be sorted out, or the famine stays. What do? You sort out the problem. Why? Because you have a famine that ain't going to go away until it's sorted. That's your motivation. Understand? So David calls together the Libyans and spoke to them. What shall I do for you, and with what can I make atonement, that you may bless the inheritance of the Lord? And the Gibeonites said to him, we will not have no silver or gold from Saul or from his house, nor shall you kill any man in Israel for us. So he said, whatsoever you say, then I will do it. Then they answered the king, as for the man who consumed us and plotted against us, that we should be destroyed from remaining in any of the territories of Israel, let 7 men of his descendants be delivered to us, and we will hang them before the Lord in Gibeah of Saul, whom the Lord chose. And the king said, okay, I'll do that. That was it. That was what they wanted. They wanted retribution to be taken on the house of Saul, but not all the house of Saul. 7 sons. 7 descendants of Saul that they would execute for all the crimes committed against them by Saul. That was it. David agreed. He chose which of the children of Saul he would give them, and he handed over 7. And God accepted that the matter was resolved and the famine ended. That's the take home here, yes? But there was something else. Rispah, the daughter of Ahijah, took sackcloth, spread it on herself on the rock, and from the beginning of the harvest until the late rains poured on them from heaven. She did not allow birds of the air to rest on them by day, or the beasts of the field by night. This was on the corpses that were hung up. She maintained a watch and protected the corpses of the sons of Saul. That is verse 10 of chapter 21 of 2 Samuel. And because of her, David made a decision that it wasn't appropriate for them to stay out there. So he took them 7 bodies. He also sent for where the bodies of Saul, Jonathan, and the rest of the sons who had died in the war would be all gathered together, and he buried them in the tomb of their father Kish, closing the story of Saul and dealing with all problems. So it was finished. It was gone. Or at least that's what we think. But we're really sure it is. So what have we learned? We've learned that when you make a covenant, God oversees it. So what is a covenant? It's an agreement between 2 people that they will do certain things. Jesus said, don't swear by God. Your yes should be yes, and your no should be no. In fact, from a Christian, every time you make an agreement to do something, you're making a covenant before God that you are doing it. Not because you're invoking the curse from God if you break it, but because you stand as a representative of God and must confirm it for that reason. You stand to bring honor to God. So even if it's to your loss, you are to honor whatever you said. That's the first thing you need to take from this. The second thing is, God's in charge of everything. The weather, the rain, famines, hailstones. So when you see changes happening in your weather patterns, don't be surprised. Realize that God is in charge and He's over all of it. And when they tell you this is a natural phenomenon caused because you forgot to not use fossil fuel when you were younger, it's all your fault, you realize. Don't get caught out by that lie. God isn't worried about fossil fuel or global warming. He uses it to his advantage when he needs to. He allows this to happen when he wants, because he will use the weather to remind man that he has provision that can cause great harm and problems to mankind, but not necessarily just to destroy them. It's to remind them, it's to bear witness to them that he is God, that he is in charge, and that he alone is sovereign. Mankind will not heed God's warning. Therefore, it's going to get larger hailstones, longer storms, hotter summers, colder winters, or vice versa. Hotter winters, colder summers, in different parts depending where you are. In other words, God will change weather patterns to just to the people and make them understand these are not normal things that are happening around them. He wants them to see the supernatural is occurring. Supernatural. Because God is intervening. We need to remember we have a king, Jesus Christ, who is coming back to take control of this earth. It is his by right. We spoke about David here, and Jesus is the son that is to inherit all that was promised to David. He is the only one that will inherit all that is promised to David. Because David never saw all kings of all the world bow down to him and acknowledge him. But Jesus will. So with that, remember, God's got his storehouses, he's got his plan, and don't make a covenant you don't intend to keep.